Hi guys, welcome back to my video series, Agile Development 101. In this episode, what I'm doing is the first card in my sprint, which is an NFR, non-functional requirement. I am adding some tests to um, some visual components that I have, well, primarily the cargo component. So the cargo has a couple of different modes and settings. What I will do is I'll add a test for each specific set of settings and verify that the correct thing appears. And what I'm doing right now is I'm looking up the API for the testing library that I use for testing visual um, components. And I don't know, I'm not an expert at this library, so I need to look up the correct command to use and the best way to do it. And I actually learned a lot during this 30 minutes that I had these tests. I learned that it's probably better for me to call these components as JSX components and not as simple JavaScript functions. Um, and what I end up doing is refactoring them. First, I refactor them out of the main component. So they were scoped to the function of the cargo component. I pull them out of that scope, and then later, as I'm reading through the documentation, I realize um, it's probably better to call them as JSX components, um, so that I can do shallow rendering, testing on shallow rendering. I don't do it for these two tests. I find it out later in the in the video. Um, but what this video illustrates, even if you didn't understand all that before, is that sometimes you have parts of your code which are difficult to test. You don't know the right way to test it. And what happens when there's something is difficult, you tend to skip it or kind of half half ASS it, and then you get technical debt built up because you don't know if something is broken or not. You don't know if something is working or not. So what needs to happen is that there needs to be some kind of mechanism to enforce that everything gets tested to an appropriate degree. And sometimes that means learning about new libraries like I do in this video. I actually know this library a little bit, but I didn't know it enough to do this testing well. Since I committed myself to doing these tests regardless of how hard it was, I forced myself to learn what I needed to know, and I ended up coming out of this 30 minutes a much better tester for my application. And in the future, it won't be so daunting to test these types of components, which are everywhere in my application. And this relates to some of the PSM1, the scrum.org certification questions. They say, one in particular says, if you're a scrum master and the development team comes to you saying they don't have the skills to complete the sprint, what should you do? And the options are cancel a sprint, bring in an expert, and something else. And then the correct answer is have them set a definition of done that is achievable and have them go through the sprint. Make them go through the sprint. Not having skills isn't an excuse. Programming is just typing. Okay, design is just drawing for the most part, and everybody can do that. If you have a hand, you can do that. If you have fingers, you can do that. So maybe I didn't know everything about this API, but I can also read. I can type and I can read. So if I said to myself, no, I need an expert, basically I'm demanding a solution that costs a lot more money than doing it myself. And I'm not empowering myself. And I'm not doing myself any favors for my career either by not learning essential skills. So the Scrum Master, is it's their job to make the team more efficient and productive. And a lot of that is psychological. So there's this daunting bit of code that nobody wants to test. We don't think we have the skills to do it. The Scrum Master should come in and say, well, I believe in you, and I believe if you give yourself the right parameters, you will be able to do it. You'll be able to learn what you need to do and do it. And not let them turn it into a management decision about experts and so on, but empower them and make them a better team in the long term. So this is an illustration of that type of situation where I didn't know enough going in, and you can see I'm kind of bumbling around right now with the code, trying to do it the right way, but I'm close to the solution now. I think this is the solution that I end up using, and in the future I won't have this problem anymore. So I can. There's a whole class of um, files that I can now test in an efficient way, just from this 30-minute exercise. So there were two components that I wanted to test, and the first one is this cargo, which has a lot of conditional display, and the second one is the edit shipment. And what I realized when I opened up the file is there is no conditional display in that component yet. There will be once we get into different states, canceled versus active, and editability, and who is the user, but we don't have that right now. So there's no point in writing tests for things that don't exist. I end up not changing very much in that component, but I will keep it in mind because now this is part of my definition of done, that I have to write these tests for every new component or every enhancement to one of these components. I need to exercise all the different settings combinations. In React terminology, it's props combinations. So I end up only testing this particular component and doing some refactoring, as you can see. And that's about it. So it didn't take very long, only 30 minutes. So my estimate of one story point turned out to be pretty close. And I learned a lot in the process. So I'm going to let the rest of this video run, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.